Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts across the network, have them automatically downloaded to your device every single day. Join our mailing list, our Discord server, follow us on social media, and our streaming platforms, all on securityweekly.com/subscribe. We welcome Chris Sistrunk, the technical manager on the ICS OT team at Mandiant. Chris joins us to tell us about how an electrical engineer got sucked backwards into the abyss of InfoSec. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you, Paul.
It's good to see you. I can't believe
crew.
Yeah, and crew, right? Like, you have not been on the show before. I'm just astonished.
No,
it's wonderful to have you here this evening.
Yeah, it's good to see you and to be seen. It's like I said, it's been a while since I've seen you and some of the other folks.
Yeah, this one time at DEF CON, at Bandcamp, which at InfoSec Bandcamp, you were with me at a party for Jack Daniel, and there was like Jack just kept coming out with these drinks that he was fermenting in his own barrel that he had brought to DEF CON.
Yeah.
And I was standing next to Chris for quite some time drinking them. And then Chris told me about this like really awesome, super expensive cigar cutter. And Chris and I were shooting the shit, hanging out at DEF CON. The next morning, I woke up with like one of the like top 5 hangovers of all security conferences that Paul ever had, and had to actually like do stuff the next day, which was
you started with the magic words, Paul. I saw Jack.
Yes.
That was pretty much all you need to say to know you're going to wake up with a hangover the next day.
But Chris was there, and we had a good chat, and friends on Facebook, and shared things about barbecuing and family life and all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's good. I before we get into InfoSec though, speaking of barbecue, you have like I think the world's coolest barbecue smoker device, because it was it your grandfather's, did you say?
Yeah, so a while back I had did a tweet. I'll tweet a lot about barbecue, and I didn't have a barbecue pit where I could smoke a brisket, but my grandfather made lots of barbecue pits, and a lot of them were just sitting out in the weather. And one that he had built himself, he worked offshore in South Louisiana, and decided back then in the 60s and 70s, he's got tired of making or dealing with barbecue pits that would rust every 3 years, right? So he's decided to make one out of stainless steel. And he made one like late 1960s or early 1970s, about 50 years ago, and I dragged it out of the woods, got all the wasps out of it, and
Step one, get the wasps out.
Restored it, and kind of did a little tweet thing about it, and it works great. It's fantastic.
What kind of stuff have you made on it since then?
Oh, well, I first had to learn how to use it because it's not a common design for a smoker. It's the firebox is below and the grill is above, so it's more of direct heat, but you can do indirect heat if you make a fire on one side.
Right.
And so I had to learn how to do it, and because he's not around, he hasn't been alive for quite some time. So I had to learn how. I started making, hamburgers and hot dogs and links, and went up to chicken, and then plenty of ribs, lots of ribs. And then I got up to doing a pork butt before the weather started getting unfavorable to keep doing that, because it takes a long time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
that's a good progression, though. But I think that's sound advice for folks if you're just getting into smoking meat. That what Chris just described is like or especially if you get into a new smoker that you just got. Start with the basics.
Don't start with a brisket. You'll screw that.
Start with a brisket.
Screw that up hard. A pork butt, though, that's like foolproof.
Well, but it still takes a long time. You know, it took me 10 hours.
Sure.
And if you're not good at maintaining a fire, especially with me, I used charcoal, hardwood charcoal. So it's not like a gas or any other. You just got to watch it. And so.
Good for you, man. It's awesome.
Good stuff.
It's kind of related to my shirt, you know. I have to, I don't know if you can see it. It's
very nice. Got the barbecue shirt going on.
Ron Swanson's shirt of greatness.
How true. How true.
Chris,
there's Ron Swanson right in his left shoulder there.
Right? Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Chris, how did you transition to InfoSec? How did you get your start in information security?
Well, I can go way back. Let's go way back. When I was a kid, we had this computer thing, 8088 clone, right? And was playing games on it. And then Prodigy came along. And this is going to be a long story, but I'm not going to make it too long, because I don't think many people ever heard me tell my origin story, really. I remember the first time, and maybe the only time that I know of that I've been hacked, was when the Prodigy pop-up said they were an administrator, and I was like, a kid.
Wait, you got hacked on Prodigy?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, dude.
Well, what happened was it was a pop-up saying, "Hey, I'm an administrator. I need your username and password." And there was nobody knew about security back then unless you were doing that stuff.
Yeah, because we're talking like what, like 90s, early 90s?
Early 90s, yeah.
Maybe even late.
And I gave him my password. I was just naive, and the next month our phone bill was like $500, because back then the Prodigy went to your phone bill or whatever it was. Fast forward, we had a BBS, didn't have a hacking community at all, didn't know anything about IRC, didn't know anything. The closest thing we had was maybe on the BBS, someone had the Anarchist Cookbook. But me, I had an engineering mindset. My dad worked for the power company, and I kind of looked up to him a lot, right? And so I wanted to be like him and learn about electricity. And so me and my brother and my two cousins, we always took stuff apart, and engineering mindset, curious mindset. We would learn how to build things and whatnot. And then, cool. Fast forward, I go through college, end up being an electrical engineer, just like I thought I would be. And about a few years into my career at the power company, I'm a power engineer, if you can't tell my background here. We started learning about this thing called NERC SIP and security for the grid, about 2005, 6, 7 time frame. The Northeast blackout, we had talked about it a little bit, but wasn't really a thing. And then 2007, the INL, Mike Asante and his Project Aurora came out, and that was like, okay, that was pretty eye-opening, right? So that made us get up to speed on that really quick at the power company. And then
I feel like that's what allowed many of us, Chris, to have the conversation about ICS and specifically like grid security.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some people poo-pooed it as well. I don't want to.
Of course, there's always people
poo-pooing stuff, right?
Like stunt hacking, as it were. But totally not. Totally not.
And using the features.
Yeah, and if anybody If anybody knew Mike Asante, you'd know that
Wasn't
that was
stunt
not
hacking.
stunt hacking.
Yeah, Asante's group was critical in getting kind of the word out about ICS security, the kinetics, and how it played into, we've been seeing some of it. There's rumors of it. If you played in certain groups, you knew about some of that. But Asante really pushed the envelope to make sure that the right people knew about it, and he did it in a way that was very political, very well spoken, and articulated that people actually listened. I think he was.
And moment of silence for Mike. Raise a glass.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure to know him.
Absolutely. Likewise. Chris, for those, but I just want to go back to electrical engineering. I think as many of us kind of don't realize how much that knowledge plays into so many things that you encounter in everyday life or your career. Putting together a podcast requires some knowledge of AV equipment, and all of that is the fundamental premises in physics and electrical engineering that go into that. Where do you suggest that people start, whether they're just getting started soldering some stuff together or analyzing any kind of electrical components? Where's a good place to start?
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, we had the World Book Encyclopedia.
Yeah, we did too.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess these days, going to Wikipedia and the YouTubes, but there's a lot of directly electrical engineering. There's electrical engineering portal. Who knows? There's so many branches of it now. You really have to pick a topic. And even when I was in school, we had to pick two categories. So I picked power and then communications, but we also had, microelectronics, and there's so many subdivisions of electrical engineering and where they bleed into computer science and cybersecurity, and it's all generally related. And then math, all that stuff really bleeds together under the STEM umbrella, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of great college courses. I think I've taken a couple of consumed some materials that were part of a college course that they offer up for free on the internet that kind of gave me some of those fundamentals, specifically that was with audio, right? Understanding the electrical signals and how they relate to audio gear was so important to understanding how to build things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of become even more popular now due to the maker movement and people learning how to use microelectronics. When I was in college, we had to fight over the good oscilloscope, and we all we had was PICs and 8051 microcontrollers and things like that. Now you've got any resource that you can think of.
My God, I swear I heard, I walked to school uphill in the snow both ways.
Yes.
Get off my lawn.
Barefoot.
Get off my oscilloscope.
Barefoot, thank you.
Yeah. Back in my day, we had 1200 baud RS-232 synchronous modems.
You had 1200 baud? You spoiled
that's what I had at the power company, man. I had all of our substations was the lightning speed of 1200 baud.
300 baud. You could actually watch it come in. Tick, 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 tick.
You can watch it. I was really good at watching the lights on a 1200 baud modem.
Because there was not much else to do while you're waiting for the damn data to come in.
There wasn't a whole lot to send. There wasn't World of Warcraft traffic or
and
Skype.
that's probably still in use today.
Absolutely. Oh, man. The things that I've seen.
Yeah, that was one of my questions for you, Chris, was I think one of the most challenging problems that we're trying to address in security today is how you deal with the security of legacy systems, we'll call them generically. In your world where you spend most of your time talking to industrial control systems in a generic sense, right? How are these conversations unfolding today when you have to advise people on securing their legacy, because there's so much legacy in industrial control
Absolutely.
systems, right? Still today.
So you have to get the context around those systems. Remember, and maybe not so much in networking design now, a lot of it's just thrown together. But back then, and even today, even with new control system, every little component of a control system is engineered for a purpose to control, like physics. And everything was purpose built all the way up to even electronic controls that's, replacing or automating, human activity or making things faster, better. And when you look at when the system was designed to when it was tested and actually installed, it might have been 10 years between it was designed on paper and specified to actually being installed in the real world. So there's quite a bit of lag because of all of the rigorous design and testing that has to go on. And so how does that work with security? It's like, well, back then we had to write our own network stack because one didn't exist that we could pull off the shelf to work with our hardware. And then say, if you had those systems, those old computers, old PLCs, old controllers, with that context in mind, hey, that's something you don't want to introduce to the internet at all. But something that's built newer, it can handle it because they've got newer systems and more modern stacks, right? So it's one of those things where, older things, I'd rather not even have them connected to the corporate network,
How do you allow people to interact with them if they're not connected, though, right? I feel like there's this pressure to push things
absolutely.
to cloud, push connectivity for maintenance, for interoperability, for monitoring. How do you fight that inertia?
Well, a lot of it was, hey, we could do preventative maintenance by, hey, instead of the engineer or technician having to go from the office out to the field to read these things, let's just send it to their computers and put them in an Excel spreadsheet so they could trend it over time, right? And that helps with maintenance and helps with cost, right? Savings. And then, what in our world we call that a data historian, but it's really like stock charts. Trends over time, data trends over time. And then there's, due to like COVID era, a lot of people had to work remotely, and so there was a lot more connectivity due to that. Wasn't there a lot of companies running out of VPN licenses because of COVID, right?
Yeah, so you just put TeamViewer on Historian and open up the port to the internet, and you're good, right?
I wish I could see. I have a meme that I love sharing, and if you look at my Twitter, it's got a picture of Captain Kirk going TeamViewer instead of Con.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's a balancing act because engineers or technicians and operators, they're having to do more with less, and maybe they're grabbing something they don't fully understand. Not that they're dumb, they just don't understand at that point. Not having been educated on cybersecurity best practices about remote access, right? So that's what we face with a lot in our industry.
Yeah. Chris, is there a push to get some of those systems like the Historian in other systems pushed up into the cloud? Or is that still that's a conversation that's happening, whereas I feel like 10 years ago we couldn't have that conversation, but today we're having those conversations because we're realizing we can apply better security, abstract the OS from the equation, so we're not running systems like the Historian on Windows XP and putting all these stupid remote access things that's just leading us to getting hacked.
Yeah, and there's other tools that have come out of this, like in the nuclear and electric sector, they use a lot of the data diodes or unidirectional gateways to get data out one way. Physically can only go out one way.
Was that was it, I hate to name vendors, but I'm going to name this one in particular because I think they had some of the original patents. Was it Waterfall Security that had some of the original products and patents?
Waterfall, and there's a OWL.
Yep.
And there's a few others, but those are the main two. Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool and smart tech. Now, we haven't talked about that particular technology in some time here on the show.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of ways to get that remote access and limit it, and that's the challenge. So that's what we help people solve, because they have limited budgets. They're trying to make things work.
Do you think that a lot of the challenges that we're trying to solve in OT and kind of the convergence, we've got a lot of people that have that institutional knowledge, they have the longstanding backgrounds, the things that are required to do a good job in ICS and OT. Do you think we're going to be able to adopt and bring them forward into a security mindset where the IT and OT are converging? Or do you think the real future and the way in which this is going to be achieved for greater security is the next generation of people coming into OT and ICS are fundamentally being trained from the ground up with security in mind, just as a culture shift?
No, I'd say it's both. We need both. I know some folks that are well seasoned, let's say that word. They've been around a long time. They have that carnal knowledge of the system, and they are smart. They can pick up.
Carnal knowledge of the system is not the word you might have meant to use.
Oh no, they fucked it up good.
Yeah.
From the right perspective.
Yeah, if you're not, making, I've had the issues where I've learned and I've made mistakes, and then I've learned from those, and that's how you learn the system. And these folks have been around so long, they know where all the bodies are buried. They know where, jiggle that wire and it'll go back to working kind of deal off the top of their head. And they're smart.
But
Very
oftentimes,
smart.
Chris, are those the same people that maybe have implemented the system? I mean, maybe they didn't. Let me put this in an ICS context. They're not the people that wrote the code, but they're the people that implemented the solution and have worked on said solution for 40 years or so. And now they're getting ready to retire. What's that knowledge transfer look like? And like, are we in bad shape or good shape in that kind of knowledge transfer to either, hey, new person, here's how you maintain this equipment, or here's what we're looking at next. Like, I'm passing the torch to you, and you're going to implement a new system, and you're going to be the expert on this new system.
Well, those issues have always existed.
Yes.
And so, but going back to the original thing is, you can teach old dogs new tricks easy, because they're nerds deep down. They like to learn new things, and even though because they understand, because people have email, people have Facebook that are getting scammed, and they're going, oh crap, this is important. And so sometimes it takes those issues to say, hey, the light comes on and now I need to go study it. Now, the people that come up are brand new, and they don't understand a lot of the way things were done. And frankly, it's not well documented in a lot of times. So they're faced with a big challenge there. But I would say it's going to take all of us, the seasoned folks and the brand new folks. I'll take a brand new folk and put them with a seasoned folk, and we can go achieve really great things. I promise you. Most of the time, with all it takes is a box of donuts.
Mm-hmm. I found there's some limits on the older folks. I mean, have you run into a case where I don't want to learn a new technology, I just would rather retire? Because I've seen it.
That's a good question.
Oh, there are those cases, of course, but it's
They're rare?
I don't like making blanket statements. I don't like making those, but the people that I've worked with are passionate, and I work with people that are passionate about learning about cybersecurity for control systems and all types, and people with 40 years of experience.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great group to hang out with. You can solve any problem with that kind of skill set.
Absolutely. And that's it, problem solving. And that's really the root of engineering and even hacking. Those mindsets are very similar, if not one and the same in many cases.
I'd argue, Chris, that problem solving and troubleshooting are two distinct skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how do you specifically teach troubleshooting? Because I'd gather in your experience you're really good at troubleshooting. How do you teach that?
Oh yeah. Oh, I used to teach it at when I worked at the power company. I had to teach a full week class on SCADA equipment, and I would teach them the fundamentals, and then during like Wednesday or whatever in the class, after the students have left, and these are all seasoned folks or young, they 20 years experience or more. And I would go screw everything up. I put jumpers in backwards, stuff in sideways, re-rack it wrong. And when you turn it on, sometimes the lights wouldn't come on or they would be wrong. And I would tell them, all right, fix it. And give them something that they would really probably never see in the real world, but
until you do.
Until you do, yeah. And so, because I would have people call me all the time and say, "Hey, the thing is down," and I go, "Is it down? Really? Is the lights on?" Well, the lights are on. Okay, well, it's not down. Oh, it rat chewed through the cable. Okay.
So it's not down, you just can't get to it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's like I teach them that process of elimination.
Yeah.
It's really what troubleshooting is, a truth table. You go through your truth table and say, okay, could it be this, this, and that?
Yeah, I think I talked about this recently, right? The biggest downfall in troubleshooting is that belief that nothing's changed. Well, wait, it can't be my fault. Like nothing has changed. And if you start with that mindset, it's
always DNS.
You're in for a world of hurt.
Oh, it's
If you think it's not DNS, it's usually DNS.
I wish had so many times where it's like there would be arguing. The people at the database would be arguing with people in the field. Well, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. I'm like, let's look at the PCAP. It'll tell you exactly
who's at fault.
What is going on, and then you can determine from there.
Because I had a user call me one time and said, "Look, I didn't change anything, and besides, I changed it all back."
It's like change the tires to find the flat, right?
Yeah.
But
this is where my mentor at the power company, he would say, as long as you got a job, I've got a job.
Wow.
Oh, old age and experience.
Yeah. Anytime anybody made a 5 o'clock on Friday mistake where we got to work over the weekend.
Yeah. How much of the stuff you deal with, Chris, is self-inflicted versus external threat actor? And more importantly, how do you tell the difference? How do you tell the difference?
Threat modeling. I love this. I actually, in my threat models, I always include honest mistake as a threat vector.
Yeah. It's the insider threat, literally. Yeah.
And it's
an insider threat, but it's not malicious, and the impact is still the same as if it was malicious.
Yep.
Sometimes it's worse.
It can be.
Because the people that make honest mistakes that are not malicious are the people that you trust. They have access to things that even a malicious insider would presumably not have access to.
The sysadmins can screw it up really good.
And throw away the keys and not realize they threw away the keys.
I've got a war story that's like that. A manufacturing company brought us in, and they had a a DMZ in between the corporate network and the site plant control system network, and it was great. And they were putting in a network monitor there to capture traffic to send back to their, security control center, right? Security operations center. And when he made the firewall change to let that happen, it shut the plant down for 26 hours because they didn't have a backup and restore procedure for their firewall.
Oops.
And that was a big mistake, but I bet he'll never make that again.
And I bet they've got a backup procedure for their firewall now.
You better believe it, they do. So it's just like one of those things. You learn from your mistakes, and it's like one of the things that when I first joined the power company, almost 20. Later this fall will be 20 years ago when I started my career. One of the distribution safety leads was, had the first safety meeting, and he said that safety rules are written in blood.
Oof.
And which is true. And that's how we learn from our mistakes. We write the rules when we make a mistake that's that bad or costly.
It's true.
So,
Larry, you were describing an interesting question earlier based on Mick Douglas's posts. So,
Mick, yeah.
Yeah, Chris, when people come to you and they're like, especially in today's current events, what do we do if Russia comes after our critical infrastructure? Right? Is the question, right? Now, those of us in security and critical infrastructure security have thought about this question based on series of events that we kind of recapped going through.
Let's put it this way. They should have thought about this question.
Yes. From, 20, you can go earlier, but like 2015 Black Energy and so on and so forth.
Black Energy 2, Black Energy 3, they have been coming after it, even in the U.S. and North America. Absolutely.
So how do you advise people today when they're worried about an enemy nation state attacking our critical infrastructure?
So a lot of times it starts with, the grid's going to go down. And I go, listen, it's not a grid. It's a quilt. It's a quilt made of 3,300 power companies. And they're not all one grid, So first of all, it's a big giant thing. It's the largest, most complex machine that humans have ever built.
But wait, it's not just one machine. What you're saying, Chris, is it's a series of tubes or a series of machines that's isolated. Yeah. Like we've, I think without maybe perhaps knowing it, maybe so, built the segmentation into the power grid in the U.S.
Well, we had to, because the first power lines were in the late 1800s. And, then they said, we want to keep these expensive copper power lines, so we should put in a circuit breaker. Well, we should put in some things, electromechanical relays, to protect the circuit breaker, to keep it from blowing up and to keep the power line from burning down. Maybe we should have multiple power lines in case a tree falls on one. And then, now we want to connect two power systems together. And let's and they just kept building and building and building.
And by the way, when that tree falls on one, we should probably take the circuit breaker and we should automate it so it turns back on to test to see if we can establish new circuits to portions of the grid.
That's right. And so generally, 99% of the time is when someone turns on their light switch, it turns on.
Yeah.
And people don't think twice about it.
Right.
And that's because of the due diligence of the giant army cadre of folks that's been working on the power grid collectively for over 100 years. And yes, there's some problems. Yes, there's some old equipment. Yes, something happens during a hurricane. Yes, power lines are going to fall over during a hurricane or an ice storm. But generally, in most cases, there are a few exceptions. There's no cyber attack that's been successful against the North American.
Yeah, Mother Nature has been far more destructive and damaging and cause more downtime.
There are no cyber defenses against attenuation by tree.
Yes.
Or squirrels.
Or squirrel.
Yeah, we used to.
Or the situation in Texas. I don't know how closely you.
That's a
followed
different
that.
one.
That's different.
That's
right?
a different one. Yeah, I
They're
worked
not
in
North
Texas.
America, are they?
Huh?
Wait, when I worked in the power industry, we referred to squirrels as APT squirrels.
Yep.
Advanced persistent threats, and sometimes they were from China, but
They are. Go back to Jericho, Cyber Squirrel 1.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
And,
I mean, just a quick diversion. I mean, tell us about Texas, right? I mean, there's a lot to be said. There are some that theorize that the amount of money that we're spending to recover from the outages in Texas, we could have spent a fraction of that, gone to nuclear power, and been better off. That we can supplement with things like wind power versus oil and gas, and be better off both from a sustainability standpoint and perhaps a climate change standpoint as well. But all of that, there's a lot of nuances there, and I always feel like the answer is somewhere in between, right? It's not 0 or 1 like we like to think of it in binary terms. The answer is somewhere in between.
It is. And well, Texas is the largest energy state producer, right? And natural gas and oil, those are very abundant and cheap. Now, nuclear could be cheap, but it's not because of all of the red tape that has to go around that.
It's regulations that have made it more expensive.
Yeah, and rightly so, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
So it's easier to put in a combined cycle gas unit and just use the local resources. It's a whole lot cheaper. And so with the thing about Texas, it's not all of Texas. It's just part of the center part of Texas. It has their own grid connection there. This is called ERCOT. And they have chosen to, be part of their own and not be connected unless it's emergency cases to the Eastern Interconnect or the Western Interconnect through DC ties. So that was a lot of technology terms. If I can explain, if anybody needs it, but the engineers have known about issues with winterizing during very, very extreme cold temperatures in the past. And I believe they finally got their wish to get it done because of, safety rules are written in blood. We had people die a year ago, due to people freezing and carbon monoxide poisoning as an indirect death, to that. So people had to die before action had to be taken, unfortunately.
And those actions, the way you describe it, Chris, makes it sound like they are connecting the central grid in Texas to other power grids as an alternate or backup.
No. What I mean is actions is remediating those, winterizing the power plants, winterizing the pipelines, because natural gas pipelines, when they come above or come close to the surface, they do have water vapor and water in them. So that's what would happen if they didn't have enough insulation and protection from extreme cold.
Yeah, this was one of those cases where Chris was talking about during the troubleshooting training that, like, this is something you should never see because it's Texas. It's never going to freeze in Texas, right? Or it's never going to freeze long enough for this to be a problem, right?
If you say never, that's an absolute, right?
Exactly.
And so, whereas in the northern power plants, they're dual fuel. They have fuel oil and natural gas.
Right.
So they have alternate sources at one plant, where that's not the case with most of the natural gas plants in Texas.
Right. Because it's typically not a threat vector you need to worry about in Texas.
Yeah. Physical threats are still a threat vector. Do
you
and that's
suppose
a
they
whole
will?
big risk calculation that people look into.
Yeah.
Lee?
I was going to say, do you suppose Texas will rethink their emergency grid connection because they took them to the cleaner pan for that energy simply because they considered it an emergency and they charged Texas whatever the heck they could get away with? Or do you think they'll just winterize and stay the course?
If this happens again, I think the citizens will revolt and have everyone's head and pull and like the leadership, even though the ERCOT leadership changed and there's mitigations have been done according to the reports where they inspected each site that had issues and there were remediations that were done. But if it happens again, this Texas folks, they're not going to have it.
It sounds like
you saw the outcry last year. It was enough outcry last year.
Sounds like the electrical grid though gets a lot of the attention and love when it comes to not just sustainability and uptime, but also cybersecurity. Chris, in your opinion, what can be done to? Well, I guess first we have to establish that other sectors such as water and in others in that realm, right, are kind of suffering. And then what can we do? Because basically they need two things, right? They need money, but they need increased cybersecurity, which is not just money. You can't just throw money at the problem. What can we do to basically increase our resiliency to cyber attacks across all critical infrastructure? That's a big question, I know.
So a great way to tackle that is to provide resources like training. And there have been grants from the government to help with that. Most of the power companies, even most of them are very small. The electric co-ops, the rural electric associations, they don't have big budgets for cybersecurity either. And so neither does water, wastewater, transportation until recently due to TSA. But, most of the time it's the water companies trying to deal with people flushing wipes and clogging the pipes, And so the way that we help them is, through the partners like, each sector has an ISAC, like Water ISAC. They put out the top 15 cybersecurity tips. And there's a lot of free training about it, especially through CISA, ICS CERT, INL. And there's just lots of information. If people want to learn about it, there's a lot of free resources out there, even all the talks, ICS Village, lots of things, even from the own power or the control system vendors, they're on board as well. So it's really taking a lot of avenues to reach those folks. And I would say that they're doing a good job. I've come across companies and sectors that are not regulated where the government's not telling them to do cybersecurity, and they're doing a good job because they're getting it. So
how do we, a lot of the public utilities though are down to the municipality level or not large companies. So we kind of have this like small business problem, right? How do we address those issues? I think many of us will think about, the way I get water or process this sewage is, like a government institution. But in reality, it's a privately held company that's providing a service. Yeah. Or in even more rural areas, the municipality is responsible for that.
Case in point, my uncle. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he still is, but one of the last times I talked to him, his comment was, "Yeah, I'm the town sewer commissioner. It's a really shitty job." And like literally, he is in New Hampshire, in a small town in New Hampshire. He lives in the center of town, and you'll be able to figure this out. Like his house is one of 3 houses in the center of town because there's the inn, the theater, the post office, the general store, and the library, and then 3 residences.
And that's the whole town.
Like that's the town center. Like
in the middle of nowhere.
in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. Yeah. Like that's
America.
Yeah.
That's everywhere.
Yeah. And he's this, and like my uncle is the sewer commissioner. You know what he did for a living? Not ICS and SCADA and he pushed paper in an office type of thing. Like, yeah. So Chris, how do we deal with this small business problem?
Well, it's again, it's the education, getting those resources out there, but also a lot of times they're having to rely on their contractors or their vendors, and because like the sewer, administrator, he's wearing 5 or 6 hats, right? And if he's got more issues with, wipes clogging pipes, then he's not going to spend as much time and effort on cybersecurity. And that's the reality. It's like, that's why they spend money on squirrel protections on the power lines.
I think one of the big points that we really do need to push on, and you're right on, is at the vendor and integrator level. Like, you've got two areas there. One, we can have the vendors develop easier, more secure products that are getting pushed at a cost-efficient manner back down to municipalities, or more likely to integrators. The integrators are the ones that are responsible for the configurations, which products to choose, how they get deployed, and then even the maintaining and maintenance and upkeep of those. So a lot of the pressure should and does get pushed to the integrator, and I think sometimes the integrators just take that, hey, we're OT, this is how we've always done it, everyone else is doing it this way, it's fine. And I think we're starting to see some of that change, and the integrators are getting more smart because of the liability pieces of this, but I think the integrators is a key avenue for us as cybersecurity professionals to really push in and offer help. I mean, we see Fire Protection Agency is a great example. They're rewriting the regulation and pushing that down in multiple avenues to building maintenance of facilities, to the integrators, to the vendors, and they're trying to get the knowledge spread. But the key players are multiple avenues that have to be addressed differently.
Exactly.
So one of the questions I have is I'm wondering about how are our cybersecurity professionals faring in the ICS OT space. I mean, my company, they have lots of control systems. We have a sewer control systems as well as groundwater monitoring, high voltage electric system, where high voltage is defined as over 13,000 volts. They don't care about anything less than 13,000. We have building monitors, building control systems, alarm systems. Pity the security control assessor who has to go validate the sewage system and make sure all those controls are working right. And so my question is,
I bet they're really shitty.
Do you have enough support for the cyber to know what the heck they're looking at and understanding? You can't update that. You can't update that Windows XP SCADA device because that's all it's got, or that these things very proprietary. You can't go sit there and do a pen test on the network with these systems because you'll crash them. I mean, do we have the expertise? I guess is where I'm at.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I would say it's a whole lot better now than it was, 12, 15 years ago, because there wasn't many of us doing control system security 15 years ago. And then Stuxnet came along.
Your title for this working title was Blame Stuxnet.
Yeah, and so that's really what sucked me into it. And I'm an electrical engineer. I didn't really have a background in cybersecurity at all. And that sucked me into it. And so I think gradually over time, these events, even though they're kind of rare, they really are, people really understand how important it is. And so now I would say, like, some of the there's so many control system security conferences around the world and it's almost ubiquitous. Like it's sexy to talk about, and it has been for a while because now it's in the newspaper. It's in the control systems is on the front page news if something ever happens, even if it's like something like TeamViewer and at a wastewater plant, And so I would say that now there's even college courses and classes from ISA, like that's the International Society of Automation. They're teaching classes about cybersecurity to regular technicians, And so I would say we're in a much, much better spot now than we were before Stuxnet. So I blame Stuxnet.
That's fair.
That's not a bad problem. I love that. That's a very nice arc. Very good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot to teach out there, and a lot of people still are not aware. But, we have these smartphones, and people are learning about security one way or the other.
Yeah, I think bridging some of that institutional knowledge or like the electrical engineering, you're kind of the unicorn here, where you don't always start with some of the fundamental knowledge of how amperage works or what line distances can change for pushing voltages across multiple power stars or black start generators, all the things that are very key to the electrical engineering side. I think a lot of people just get intimidated, and we are kind of at a disadvantage when you start talking about that base knowledge that's required to get some of the fundamentals. But I think you can still get into the security with inside of ICS when you understand the nuances, the safety aspect, the mindset, and kind of the culture, and then you start to adapt and figure out the pieces of those institutional knowledge. That does take time. Electrical engineering is a very, very hard degree to get. It's very technical, and there are a lot of aspects that you do need to know that provide fundamental knowledge for doing good security testing within inside this space. But that should still not be a barrier to entry, but I think it is one of the reasons I don't see more people kind of jumping in. There is a substantial amount of things that sound foreign, just like in security. There is an entire new set of acronyms and dialect that you have to adapt and do the security on at the same time. So there's just I think a combination of things that we're starting to see people get past, but it is a little bit of an effort still to make that leap.
One of the best ways to do that is like, people ask me, how do you get into control system security? And you can either come like my way is coming up from engineering and learn networking and learn security. But then there's the people that come in from the IT background or networking background or hacking background, and then they learn about the physics processes with mechanical systems, electromechanical systems, cyber physical systems. And so the best way to do that is just collaborating. Take a box of donuts or take a case of Red Bull. Depending on which way you're going, tell the IT folks to take a box of donuts to the operators and ask them about their pain points about cybersecurity, and they'll tell you. And vice versa, if you want to learn more about the latest in InfoSec, you just go take a case of Red Bull up to the SOC and say, "Hey, I want to learn more about this. I can teach you some engineering. You can teach me some Log4j stuff. What is this Log4j stuff?"
I love that.
It's not a problem anymore.
No one's scanning for it anymore. It's not a problem.
Yep.
These aren't the droids you're looking
so
for.
hard.
That's it.
That's like saying configure isn't a problem in the power world. Okay, I mean
it's not
still
anymore.
a problem.
Not in the power world now.
Where is it a problem? Because
in the oil field, well, it's getting better.
It's getting better. I remember, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, somebody asked you, it might have been me, what's the worst problem in OT? And you were like, well, besides squirrels? Yeah, besides squirrels, configure and blaster. Because it was still rolling around because of all the old crap.
Mariposa botnet, Palevo, Yeah. I mean, there's still those places where, You got SMB1, you got LLMNR, you got NetBIOS name servers, you got DNS, the usual suspects, right? Mm-hmm. And and so that's things that we come across, but we catch them, and sometimes people are just lucky that they haven't had any issues. And we've been into places where we've seen all these old malware swimming around, and they're creating all this network traffic, but the process is still running. And so that's a win in and of itself. Even if you do get Conficker on a machine, a lot of them still run.
I was your comment about, what's going on, what's working and stuff. I was thinking in your advice just a minute ago, maybe, find the guy who created the system that made all that stuff work together and have him do a show and tell, so you can freaking understand what it's doing and get him bragging on his work, because that's worth a lot.
Absolutely. No, I did that when I was a young engineer. I tried to ask those questions. Tell me about your baby. And then their eyes would light up. Yeah. Let me tell you about all this. And they'd nerd out. It's like when people ask me about glass insulators or
I did that earlier.
Right? Signs behind me. They ask all about these old antiques. And let me tell you about DMP3.
Ooh, please tell it.
Oh, that's old news.
I know.
Has the vendor landscape, Chris, gotten better in terms of firmware updates and the like? I remember teaching and lecturing, if you will, on embedded device IoT devices using ICS and keeping up to date on firmware. And I think like after that we started seeing like a huge sandworm and all that stuff started coming out. Stuxnet, again, blame Stuxnet. For really what you're nodding your head, I'm envisioning now this kind of positive lecture that you're going to give on ICS vendors kind of waking up going, oh, we need to make sure we provide security updates with our firmware for these devices that are controlling our critical infrastructure.
So I will pat those vendors on the back. They are implementing software development, security development lifecycle in their products, and some of them even have signed firmware. And that's really fantastic. And they have a whole product cert where you can report security issues, and they have a team that handles that. And that's been going on, since Stuxnet. But you still have, on the other hand, you still have so many devices that honestly still use insecure protocols like Modbus. And so there's the two-way street. They're doing a great job. And some of these older protocols, you just have to not let them talk to the internet. And that's the way around it. Because once an attacker gets to the PLC, it's game over.
Which it can have up-to-date firmware, even validating updates, but if it's implementing an insecure protocol that does not require authentication, like Modbus, typically how it's configured, that's a problem. Segment it all you want, but you get on the right segment, and
it's not. I wouldn't say it's a problem because we're not seeing outages happen all the time because people are scanning Modbus. Now, I will say that there's plenty of Modbus and other control system protocols out there on the internet. You can go look on Shodan and Census and all these other places and find them. But day in and day out, people have gotten the idea, these should be segmented. We still come across some that are not. Big flat networks still happen, but somehow they're lucky, and that's the ones we try to help improve. It's we're trying to do the best that we can with what we have. I try to stay real positive about it, and it's real exciting to help people learn about it. But I've also seen, hey, even with the most cyber secure everything, we've got people at where I work, they can bypass two-factor like it's nothing, and bypass all the latest antivirus. So It won't even matter if it's a targeted attack.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm glad we added that aspect in this conversation, Chris. We've kind of talked about more of the commodity stuff that's happening, but you get a targeted attack like Stuxnet. A lot of this stuff is kind of out the window.
Absolutely. So it's in how you respond and how good are your response processes. Just like when a hurricane happens, you practice. I mean, when I was at the power company, and they still do it, they have hurricane drills. The playbooks for the hurricane response is a big, giant book like this. It's like 3 or 4 inches thick. And it takes like 200 people to play that at one company, and they go through, they have fake name storms and everything. And so and that's because, power companies are really good at dealing with Mother Nature. Same way with incident response. If you're doing incident response all the time, you get really good at it. And so we try to share our knowledge, collectively. I'm not talking about just my company, but people learn the best lessons learned in incident response and protection and hardening. And we try to share those lessons learned to help people prepare for those things whenever they do happen. That way they can get back up and going. So,
more questions for Chris? Anyone?
Tell us about some of those signs over your left shoulder there.
Oh, man. Great collection of signs. Whenever I got this new house, it was during the pandemic, and I was like, I'm going to be on Zoom and WebEx and Teams and whatnot. I'm like, I got to have a cool background. I could do the virtual background, but so I had a couple of these signs, like this one from Louisiana Power and Light, and this one over here, and I had this this sticker here that was on a 1970s Louisiana Power and Light bucket truck that I put on a piece of metal.
Nice.
And I was like, hey, this would be kind of cool to just kind of collect them and put them in my office as a backdrop. So over the last 2 years, over the last year, I've been going on eBay, and people have sent me some friends in Germany sent me this one from Germany. I've gotten some from other sign collectors. There's people who actually collect porcelain signs.
Yep. So
I was like, let's get some cool ones. So I've tried to get them in different languages. Got some Arabic and Polish and Russian and one from Canada.
French.
And, France.
Danger to more. Yep. Danger.
Yeah.
Death.
This will hurt the entire time you're dying.
Yes.
I mean,
this will kill you until you die from it.
Yeah. So that's just kind of it. It's my office is kind of like a museum. I've got old GE brass fans. Got Jack Daniel down there. I don't know if y'all can see him.
Oh. Like the
he's
person,
watching over
the person or the spirit?
Yeah, hold on.
Or the spirit of the person, or both? Oh, like the spirit of the person.
Pick him up.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He's watching you.
He's always
the bobblehead of Jack Daniel. When did you get that?
B-sides 2017. B-sides LB. Life's a Breach.
It's awesome. So Chris, my question in your collection, do you have a power meter that tells time?
I don't, but I have a power meter.
I mean, because you told Monte Elkins that it couldn't be done.
No, I told him it could be done.
Oh, you told him it could be done, and I think he cursed you every moment when he built that thing.
I give him all kind of nice ideas. If I lived next to him, we'd be like cooking up evil stuff in the lab all the time. That's for sure.
And if you're not cooking up stuff in the evil lab, you're cooking it up in his remote TV broadcast van.
You guys reminded me of Breaking Bad now. I started watching Breaking Bad again with my oldest son, who had never seen it. We decided it was time that he could watch it. Yeah. I'm not quite sure that was
a good idea.
A good idea?
You don't remember all the details from that show.
No.
There's some interesting things. And enabling for interesting conversations, put it that way. We're making an educational experience, but it reminds me of you cooking up stuff in a trailer, Walter White and Jesse. It's kind of...
Hey,
So just remember, when you find yourself going, all right, look, in real life, meth isn't blue. That's
Right.
not the point.
It's not the point.
Right.
Not the point. What's a gateway drug? Okay, let me
Shit.
pause it. We've got some... But, I mean, those are... You should have those... I feel at some point you should have those conversations. And
Yep.
you parent as you will and say how everyone, our audience should parent, but, yeah.
is that why they called it Gateway 2000?
Maybe.
Oh.
Certainly drove me to drink. Some of those early gateway machines, right?
Maybe even a little mad cow in there too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Well, Chris, we just have 5 questions left for you. Ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
All right. Southern. Gosh. That's it. Southern. Gosh. I don't
Southern,
know.
gosh.
I love it.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
The Jacob's Ladder.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Don't do this.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Well, I haven't seen all hacker movies. I would say Star Wars.
Oh, interesting.
Because Star Wars is about the hacker mech droid R2-D2.
Yeah, I mean, like seriously, the Empire would be so much better if they stopped putting R2 compatible data ports on everything.
Data ports
true.
everywhere.
Exactly.
There is that angle. So many
Seriously.
angles of Star Wars. Yes.
Seriously.
Yes.
Just remember, if they had a proper Auth-Z system, Star Wars would have been dead after like 20 minutes.
Or
Yep.
if they just blew up the escape pod with the droids. Never mind. Chris, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
2 celebrities. All right.
Celebrities is a very loose term, of course.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Let's say, y'all are stumping me. Let's say maybe Muddy Waters
Oh.
and
You are a Southerner.
no. It's, let's see. Who's the? Julia Child.
Whoa. Ooh,
Whoa.
that's a good one.
You are so Southern.
Whoa.
You are so Southern. Music and food. I
Whoa.
love you, man.
Muddy Waters
Music and
and Julia
food, the
Child?
important stuff.
Holy crap.
Chris, you gave some very unique answers to those
Holy
questions.
crap.
There are no right or wrong answers, but very awesome. Chris, it was wonderful having you tonight on Pulse Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite, and it's good to see all of you. So
Yes.
It's been a while, and nice to meet you, the ones that I haven't met.
With that,
And hopefully we'll see you soon in person.
absolutely. With that,
Chris,
we'll take a short
pleasure.
break. Coming up next, what do we have coming up next? There's an interview with Josh Corman. Make sure you stay tuned for this one. It's a good one.
It'll be epic.